welcome her back to challenge us some more today.
Thank you. And thank you. So many of you I was able to have conversations with last night and this morning, and thank you for sharing your stories. I hope you continue to do that. This morning, this is a little bit of a different topic. Yesterday, I talked about personal holiness, us pursuing holiness. And so I get a little nervous doing that because I'm being vulnerable and sharing my stories. Today, this is my stuff. This is what I usually go around talking about. Because families, we need to reach families. God has put that on my heart. That is my calling. That was me yesterday, right about here. I kept moving to the side because that sun comes in. So if you need to move at any time or get up and walk around, that will not bother me at all. So I told you I started training on the idea of engaging parents in 2004. In 2010, the diocese hired me while I was still working at the parish to consult with them, the Diocese of Joliet, to help other parishes figure out what family, faith, or family outreach could look like in their parish or their school. The same year, our Sunday visitor hired me to speak for them and then to write curriculum so that parishes that were trying to reach out to families, schools that were using their Alive in Christ curriculum, had something for parent sessions, for at-home connections. And then I began writing curriculum for Center for Ministry Development, Archdiocese of Chicago, and now also working with Vibrant Faith. Innovation labs focused on families at the center of faith and creating cultures of calling. So this was my capstone in my MAPS program, was reimagining faith formation, reaching families. This is my passion. I have way too much stuff here this morning, so Jackie's already been told 3. And if I'm not paying attention to her and you see her, 3 is 15 minutes, 2 is 10, 1 is 5, so that I can get through some of the stuff that is really focused on the practical and practiced ways, whether you're in a school or a parish, that we can walk with and engage families. But a lot of that we'll be doing in the workshop afterwards. So I want to give you a little taste, but it's going to be really fast, whereas we're going to dig into it later. So we'll do a little bit of the introductions. Done. The church today. Why am I going to spend so much time at the beginning on why we should do this? Because a lot of times in a parish or a school, we're still like, yeah, we'll send something home. I teach 4th grade. Why am I worried about having to reach out to parents? I hope some of what we go through this morning convicts you. We are all called to reignite faith in families and to reignite faith practices. So we'll go through studies that talk about how parents matter most. Not that we don't in a parish or a school matter in influencing that faith, but parents matter most. And then we'll talk about some of those practical ways, multi-components, different ways that you can engage. And hopefully I'll get to the transformative mission that it is. So, more important than ever, our landscape is changing. We now have 56 million unaffiliated adults in the United States. This is the last study from 2014. That number grew. Young people, 1 million to 2 million in just 7 years. And that's 4 years ago. It's continuing to grow. You can imagine in our crisis right now, it will continue more unless we do something. Growing religion in the United States, if it was really a religion, is ex-Catholics. That should be daunting to us. We have a great mission field out there. So there's a new study out, especially if you work with young people, you should read. Going, Going, Gone by Bob McCarty. Also John Vacek, it's co-author, in the disaffiliation of young people. So we've been talking about how young people have disaffiliated. They really did research on why. And in this, they say there's a persistent and perhaps even growing culture of personal autonomy or choice. I want to choose what I practice. Among young families and children, parents are more likely than those in the past to allow children to choose their faith. I might get them baptized. I might not. Let's let them decide what they want to be. So we don't have the culture we had at one time where if you were Catholic, of course you were baptizing your children, bringing them back, getting married in the church, having them baptized and raising them, often at the school, but even in a religious ed program. Most of them stopped, almost most, before they got to 13, but almost all by the time they were 17. Now, those youngest ones, under age 5, we can't blame those kids. They're not going to get themselves to church. Even 5 to 9, almost 20% of them stopped affiliating with the Catholic Church before they were 9 years old. Those of you who work, whether in the school or parish, in sacramental prep, you know that probably means they made their first communion and they were done. That huge group in red, 13 to 17 years old, they made their confirmation and they were done. We have a part in changing this. So we went through some of that. Although one part of coming into the Catholic Church, for every adult coming into the Catholic Church each year, 6 people leave. Again, that was in 2014. That has grown. If you are a Catholic, call, your mission is to change that and create disciples. In that study of Going, Gone, they found out reasons why people left. They put them into 3 different categories: the drifters and the dissenters. The injured, there was some kind of pain, whether there was abuse or whether parents were divorced and parents felt like they didn't belong. One parent, but not the other. There was some kind of pain that caused them to walk away. In the others, the drifters, there was this so what attitude. What does this have to do with my life? Because they were learning in their religious class or in religious ed, but they weren't living the faith. They weren't making connections to what they were learning about and how it mattered to them. And in the process of that, they were also absorbing parents' attitudes of lack of care. Parents who really weren't practicing the faith, they'd promised grandma that the kid would go to Catholic school or something like that. They weren't engaged in their parish. And then the dissenters, those actively disengaged because they disagree with the church's teachings. However, they also found that most young people still believe in God, and they want to be connected spiritually. A critical first step for the church to provide a non-judgmental place for young people to openly and honestly wrestle with their questions, their struggles, their doubts in faith and religion. That goes back to what we talked about last night. If we give them a safe place to have these conversations, to wrestle with who is God, do I believe or not, instead of telling them what they have to imagine, what we are putting on them, if we can help them make it their own, that changes everything. So at least 1/3 of millennials claim no religious affiliation right now. We've been talking about millennials for as long as I have been in ministry. The funny thing now is that millennials are a lot of the parents that have children in our programs, that have children in our schools. And if they're even showing up to register their child for school or religious ed, they are being countercultural. Whether or not we see the level of practice, mass attendance, or anything else, we have to affirm them just in that they're showing up, because that action alone makes them countercultural. The culture no longer says you have to raise your kids with faith. No longer says you have to have your child in a Catholic school or getting their confirmation or getting married in the church. The culture's not supporting that. So who are the millennials? They are, as I said, often the parents in our programs because they are 22 to 37 years old now. That next generation were born after 1996, and research suggests, because the millennials are their parents, most likely they will be even less engaged unless we do something now. So, the research tells us parents matter most in the faith formation, the religious formation of their children. Children need to see us being church together, not just learn about what the Catholic Church teaches, but to see us being church. And that means in Mass, but that also means in the community. It means corporal works of mercy, spiritual works of mercy. It means living the faith. Mission trips. It means living the faith. Fish fries. It's everything that we are. The best way to get most youth more involved in and serious about their faith is to get their parents more involved in and serious about their faith. So, when I'm doing this, this is the slide that usually gets people. So if you are a religious educator and your diocese or program insists that you have 30 hours a year of religious education, and that child shows up every one of those 30 hours and is completely engaged for every one of those 30 hours, you have 3/1000ths influence over that child's life. 3/1000ths. If we're not partnering with the parents, what kind of hope do we have with 3/1000ths? If you're at a Catholic school, you're like, yeah, but they get religion every day. I'm in a Catholic school. If you're at a Catholic school, that goes up to 19/1000ths. If they have religion for 1 hour every day of the week, 175 days a year. 19/1000ths. If we partner with parents, that goes up exponentially because they're with them when they wake up in the morning, breakfast, dinner, prayers at meal, car conversations, holiday practices. If we can reignite faith and faith practices, that changes everything. It's not just 19/1000ths of their life or 3/1000ths of their life. And I know some are sitting in disbelief. Do the math. We did it. Do the math. Our mission field also grows in how people are engaged. For those families who identify as Catholic in 2015, only 8% have their children in Catholic middle school or grade school. 3% in a Catholic high school. Again, this is of those who identify as Catholic. 21% in parish religious education programs. 68%, nothing, no formation whatsoever. If we engage our families and they're living the faith in the community, they can reach those families. We don't have contact with those families, but they can. They do have contact. They can say, hey, we're going to that fish fry. We're going to one of those events. Come with us. The question with that one is, if we do not connect with parents, if we don't make an effort in our schools and our religious ed programs, are we giving parents permission to remain detached? Are we giving them permission to be at arm's length? The ministry of evangelization carried out by Christian parents is original and irreplaceable, says our church. Pope Francis wrote a lot about this in Amoris Laetitia. Couples and parents should be properly appreciated as active agents in evangelization and catechesis. Family catechesis is of great assistance as an effective method. Parents have a mission as the evangelizers of their family. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I will share these slides, this whole PowerPoint, with Jackie and Sarah, and there'll be a number of resources at the end. You can get this report at catholicfamilyfaith.org. I'll have the links. It's the most recent report from Christian Smith, who has done a lot of studying. Soul Searching is one of his books, Souls in Transition, and really has looked at young people and their families. This was from Christian Smith and Justin Barkis. They presented this at the University of Notre Dame, summer of 2016. And a lot of people that are in evangelization and catechesis attended and began tweeting everything they were hearing. So, for one, Christian Smith said, parents and families talking about faith is especially important for the future religious practice. And somebody else said, well, he's continued there, talking is practice. Carolyn Pirtle, parents don't have to be experts in order to talk about religion and faith. They just need to show it's important. When I go into a parish and we begin consulting, a lot of parishes are afraid we can't have the parents teaching the kids, they don't know anything. They know more than we think, first. But in the process of engaging them in a way that lets them ask the questions, they learn more and they want to learn more. And when they begin talking about it at home, the whole family grows. In the years since we started outreach to families at St. Jude, almost every single year, a non-Catholic parent who's been attending our sessions, whether because the wife or the husband make them, or whether because they're the parent that's available to go that night, every year, at least one has become Catholic through the RCIA program because they have a space to ask questions that they didn't have before. Because they thought Catholics didn't talk about Jesus, they only hear Catholics talk about the church. And all of a sudden, it was completely different for them. This kind of outreach can change everything. But for too long, like Jonathan Sullivan says, we blame parents. Instead, we need to offer information, support, encouragement, empowerment. When I started, I went to one parish, and the DRE complained, they won't even come in for a parents' meeting. I tell them it's mandatory, they don't, but they'll sit out there for 3 hours at a soccer field. Like, yep. But you know what? At that soccer field, they have other parents who are traveling with them. They've created a community there where they're all in support of their children together. Where do they do that?
We missed the boat.
Yeah.
Right after baptism.
Right after baptism, we miss the boat. We need to give them places where they can create community in the parish. One group this morning was talking about young moms who come into Mass, and it's like, you're struggling with your kids, you're this and that, people are giving you a dirty look. You try that for so long, and then you're like, I have nobody here, I feel isolated. We need to give them places to create community and quit blaming them. So some takeaways, I'm gonna leave that for you to read later. Out of that study, 2 things were the most important. God talk and faith practices. God talk was any time they were talking about God, going on a walk. Where do you see God? Where do you notice him? Does he speak to you in creation? Does he speak to you through scripture? Does he speak to you through sacraments? Does he speak to you through other people? What is the thing? What is your God language? And helping a child realize that. One of the recent studies talked about how there are 3 transcendental paths to God. And they are, let's see if I can remember, truth, beauty, and goodness. Thank you. We want to teach goodness and morality, and we want to teach truth. We often forget about beauty. And for those children who that's their God language, that's where they find their spiritual life, we're missing a whole generation of children. So it's good. We have people now like Bishop Barron who are focusing on beauty, lots of media that's focusing on beauty in our faith. We need to remember that every child has that different language. So again, even at prayer time, I have parents who are like, I don't know how to pray with my kids. I'm like, I didn't either when they were little. I had a babysitter who watched my kids while I was still teaching when they were very little. She was a Christian woman who had worked at a Christian school. Jesus was her best friend. She shared story times with them after lunch before they went down for a nap. When I started staying home from work, I was like, shoot, I gotta up my game. Like, I don't want, how did you learn about God? Susan? I didn't want that. I was like, and I didn't want Jesus to sound foreign on my tongue. So I was like, start at dinner time. I mean, like, people started we had friends who would give advice. Start with highs and lows. Turn those into praises of thanks. And the lows, prayers for help. I said, if I did it now, after Anne Lamott came out with a book, I would add, wow. Where were you wowed today by God's awe, by wonder? Blessing your children. My parents never blessed me. I didn't know that was a thing. And so we moved into a neighborhood where one of our kids' best friends across the street they would bless their kids every day when they left, every night when they went to bed. Like, how beautiful is that? My kids are like, 14, 15, 13, 14, 16 at the time. Yeah, don't start that now, Mom. Come on. So things that we can give them. Home conversations they can have. Schools and parish, you're all called to this. Kids in 9th grade, you're still called to this. Maybe it's having that family do a prayer walk and a reflection when you're teaching about nature. But there's something you're called to do. We said yesterday, affirming families in their holiness. That's one of the biggest things we need to do. They sacrifice, they forgive, they heal, they pray. They do those things. And they teach their children to do the same. Becoming more like Jesus every time they do. But we have to start easy. When I shared that story last night about reconciliation that I shared with parents, that doesn't come at the beginning of the year, the first time parents ever show up at a parent event. The first time they ever show up, it's all about their kids. If they're going to talk to each other, it's about their children. We don't start with that one where in the small group there they talk about when has it been hard for you to pray? When you started there? Silence. But you get them to talk about your kids. How many do you have? How old are they? What has most surprised you about becoming a parent? That is my favorite one because they tell you the truth. And it can be anything from push your buttons to how little sleep I can go on to I never imagined before I had my second child that love multiplies and is not divided. But they share beautiful stories about parenting, and then they connect with one another. What is your greatest joy? What is your greatest fear as a parent? That connects parents too. It's difficult raising kids in this culture. Give them a place where they can talk to each other about raising their children with faith. What advice are you grateful for? Affirm that you know parenting is the most difficult job. Tonight, the legacy, you're affecting eternity. What a great privilege. What a huge responsibility. And so affirming parents that you know that. So like I said, we start with affirmations. They're already doing some of this. Catholic social teaching, spiritual works of mercy, corporal works of mercy. It's kind of like that teacher catch 'em being good. We started a Families Living the Gospel program. So we have a multi-component that we'll get to in a second. But in the Families Living already doing, and fill out a little reflection form. We fed the hungry this week by doing this. Here's what we felt, here's what we talked about, and they turn it in. And we have a whole little prize. We draw for a prize 3 times a year for that one. So they turn as many as they can. And they're glad to talk about what they're doing. And then we share that in the newsletter, in the parish bulletin, on social media stories, because then evangelizers. So you have to help them tell those stories. Look at what you already have. Most of our curriculums now, not all, but most have family components. Send home. The problem is often we just send it home. In the parishes I work with, I always encourage them, send it home, but get those stories back. Print their stories. Because if you're just sending it home and there's nothing, they don't think you really care. There has to be some accountability, not because you want to check it off they did it, but because you want to hear their reflections, because their stories matter, and you want to share their stories with the rest of the community. So parish and school, family engagement nights. Whether you're a grade school or high school, you can have all kinds of parent outreach. We'll get to some of those. This is some of the things that parishes and schools that I've worked with are doing. These are also all of the things that the parish that I work in is doing still today. Monthly parent sessions based on the child's curriculum themes. So like when our kids come for religious ed, the parents also come. They sit in small groups like this. And so like the first unit of the year is Revelation, how does God reveal himself? The whole family's talking about that together. Their home connections are focused on that. The things they're going to teach at home and bring back are focused on that. Family sacramental preparation. A lot of parishes and schools do sacramental prep together. Some do not. Regardless of whether you're doing it together or not, regardless of which sacrament it is, today, I believe it has to have a family component. We cannot do it without the parents. Because you can teach the kids and they can receive the sacraments, but how can they live it out if the family is not living it out? So that has to be a component. Seasonal family events. Parents will engage when it's family sacramental prep because they want their child to have that. They'll also engage in seasonal, Advent, Lent, some feast day particular to your school or parish. Life of the parish components. The next workshop will be entirely about curriculum that is based on your community. Our Life of the Parish component is a piece of their curriculum that they get to choose what they want to learn about. They get to choose how they participate in their faith across the community. They have a reflection form. On the backside of it, it lists everything happening in the parish that can count, and everything counts. Everything counts. So they come to take an ownership over their own faith growth. And when you allow them that, miracles happen. Because now it's based on their schedule, their spirituality, their children's ages. Whether they're going to do it mom and daughter, father and son, or the whole family, they get to choose. Parent electives. Especially for junior high and high school, we may not have monthly parent gatherings. We may not get as much engagement in some of the things, but have an elective where we brought in a speaker. I spoke to somebody about him this morning, Roy Pettifees. He's a counselor down in Louisiana, but a Catholic speaker as well. Has written books, has a new one coming out that I'll share in the next session and that you'll have available through the resources, who wrote a book and came to speak on it, What Your Teen Wants You to Know, but Won't Tell You. That gym was packed. Parents came. They wanted to know how to talk to their children about things. He also has videos out right now, how to talk to young people about the sex abuse scandal. Has a podcast, Today's Teenager. Lots of resources we share with parents come from people like that. And again, they'll engage then. Living the Gospel Challenge. I shared our Families Living the Gospel. We highlight 1 year Catholic social teachings, the next year corporal works of mercy, the next year spiritual works of mercy. It's a 3-year cycle. Parents turn those in as their family has participated in activities, and we draw prizes. Extraordinary events. I'll share a little bit more about that later. Mass. We don't beat them over the head, but we let them know that Mass is a critical part of our faith. It's how we express who we are as Catholics. And we want them to go every single week. But once a month, we want them to reflect on that Mass and do some liturgical catechesis with us. Home connections, online, and social media outreach, which if I get to, we do like playlists. So like, again, they love having their own choices on what they're gonna go to. They also, if you can't gather everybody together, we do an Advent and a Lenten playlist. And that can count as one of their Life of the Parish components because they choose from any number of activities that are on the playlist. In it, it might say, if you have 5 minutes, do this in preparation for Advent. And there'll be a video from Busted Halo or Father Mike Schmitz or somebody. They watch it, they answer the questions, reflect. If you have 15 minutes, 30 minutes, half a day, if you'd like a retreat for your family, it has anything where they can choose to do it themselves. And kids are used to playlists, so they go on and they check everything out and they figure out where their family's gonna participate. No one way to do it, so many ways. I'll have my email at the end. If you have questions, because you're like, yeah, I don't see how that would work here, give me a holler, because outreach will work anywhere. At St. Jude, like I said, we have a multi-component approach. Children gathered with their catechists, parents come, small group parish, families live in the gospel, and extraordinary events. We are coming at them from many directions. They used to have 30 hours in the classroom. They don't have 30 hours in the classroom anymore, but they have many more hours of formation. And now that it's showing that the parents care, because the parents are there and they're teaching also, catechists are sharing how much more the kids are remembering, how much more they know. We've had a second grade catechist who's probably been with us for about 20 years. She was the most skeptical board member I had when this started. She's still on our board, and she is one of our greatest advocates, because she said a few years ago when the kids came back to class when they were going into second grade, she used to have to reteach them the sign of the cross, reteach. She goes, these kids know these things now. And it's so excited to just get started where she's ready to go. 6th grade catechists are sharing. So I usually, when I go into a parish or a school, share some pictures of what the parent session looks like. Now we do it monthly, but a school, like I said, could do an elective. I always say it's critical whether you have a speaker come in to talk about a subject you think is important for the parents to hear, whether you're doing a seasonal or anything. You have to give parents an opportunity to create community. So there has to be times they can talk to each other. And there always has to be hospitality like this. Because you give people some food, put them around a table with each other, magic happens. All right, so in these pictures, we'll go through these a little bit more later, but what do you notice in the workshop, What do you notice? Shout out some things. Say it again. They're talking to each other. Leaning into each other. Smiling. Actively participating. Comfortable. Anything else? Engaged. Dads. My pastor, this was one of the first reasons he wanted to do it. We have dads. We have so many dads. We have dads who get so excited about being together on this. They created this community together, especially our dads who are on Sunday morning. So they come once a month on Sundays. They are now meeting on the weeks where they don't have a gathered session because they have these spiritual brothers that they've met. It is amazing to see. So my husband hadn't been there a while. And when we stopped in, it was really because my pastor, Father Don, was like, hey, we got the new sound system you've been wanting for 10 years. Okay, I'll go check it out. My husband came with me. The new directors were running a session. And I said, honey, and he was talking to the pastor. I'm like, I gotta take some pictures. And when we were done, he's like, this doesn't look like when you guys first started, when we'd stand there and talk at them for an hour and a half. When we were so worried about getting them to know everything about the subject we were teaching, what we realized was what happened in those conversations was better spiritual nuggets than anything we were sharing. We still make sure that there's a good 45 minutes to hour of content, but an hour and a half, they have at least 3 times where they're gonna first reflect on prayer together and then have conversations about life. My husband was like, God, I would have loved to have had other dads when our kids were little that could be my spiritual brothers. Like, what would that have looked like? Little kids, he's like, I can't believe how many little kids you have running around the place, parents carrying babies. We have childcare. We have a nanny program during that time, but we tell parents, you want your kids with you, by all means keep them with. And in that process, kids feel welcome. Imagine what kind of formation those kids, by the time they are 5 and have been sitting at their parents' tables, watching all of these parents engaged in faith formation. How much impact will that have on those little ones? They're making church friends, yay. And they're affirming them. And we're giving them places to have those conversations. However you have parent sessions, some important things. Remember that families come in all shapes and sizes. Half of the families in our parish are divorced. We had no way to reach out to them before we started gathering. We had a mom who showed up the first time, her oldest child, first grade, she was scared to death to come. She thought she was going to sit around with a bunch of perfect parents, couples, and be the only outcast. She said, my family's still judging me because I'm divorced and raising this child by myself. They make me feel like I'm not good enough to be a Catholic. The second month she was there, she came up to us afterwards and says, I told you beforehand I was afraid. She said, these people, she said there were 2 other people at my table that were divorced. I feel like I have a home in the Catholic Church for the first time in years. She felt affirmed. She felt like she had friends already that she could talk to about how hard it was some days. So no, some of those families have children who identify as gay. They're struggling. Some of those families are dealing with parents living with them, with illnesses. They need a place to unpack all this. Don't single out those divorced or single parents, but know that they're there and support them. Don't focus on what parents are not doing. Keep encouraging the right things, but affirm what they are doing. Don't make them feel scolded. I've been to, when I consult with a parish, I'll go in the beginning of the year and sit in on the parent meeting. And if you're a parent coming in and you're at a meeting where they're just reading the handbook to you and yelling about what you should be doing, the first thing you want to do is get out the door. Don't scold them if they're in front of you. Affirm them, help them feel connected. So again, ideas. Catholic Schools 101, pick a topic. If you're in high school, it could be a topic about religion and science. Pick a topic, any topic, but engage them. Reflect, have them reflect on what they're doing. Playlists. Again, I'll share these with you so you can go to it and see what's there. Maybe if you're in the younger grades, one of the projects could be family reflections on this, like a weekly reflection. Have them take pictures, have them keep a scrapbook. And periodically through the year, somebody gets to bring it in and share their stories. When we started this Life of the Parish component with the community as curriculum, like I said in the workshop, we'll go more into that, but it started with a study of the church's document, Our Hearts Were Burning, from 1999. The document says the parish is the curriculum. The document said we should be primarily focused on adult faith formation, not children. This document's only 20 years old, and we're just beginning to unpack it. But if your community has an opportunity to read and study it, amazing things will come out of the reflections from those who are doing it. Go back to that one. The first time, and I think I have like 1 minute. 3. We had a who told us when she handed in her form on her Life of the Parish. I chose Stations of the Cross. I knew nobody was going to ask me any questions. I was going to get in and out in 30 minutes or less. And I could just show up, be invisible. 6, 8, and 9. And we began with the first station. She said it's like Catholic muscle memory. All of a sudden, every part of my being remembered doing this when I was little. And I went every Friday night during Lent with my aunt, who has since passed away with cancer. She's like, so I'm reflecting on this. And by the time we got to the second or the third station, I'm getting emotional. Like, what's wrong with you? We're going to... It continued. She was in tears. And then when one of the boys said something to her, she realized this was a treasure she had had. They had never experienced Stations of the Cross in their whole lives. And she's like, when I keep saying, I just want them to have what I had. I just want them to have it. Just let them go to CCD. I want them to have what I had. She's like, they don't have what I had. I had an entire that we were all being raised together with that. Let them choose. They need to see us being church together, praying for our priests. The kids need to be able to teach us. Have fun events. This was one, the Care for God's Creation Reptile Party. It was for the kids, but about 50 parents showed up. Because they know they're welcome in everything we do. Kids had a blast watching their parents play with snakes. Oh, got that one in there. Find things in your community, whether school or parish, make that a community gathering. I'm going to go through these quickly, just so you see you have them. Social media. We create pages for couples and for parents on Pinterest with videos from all the stuff that's going on. Even if you're in high school, you could create a page so that people have access to the really good stuff that is both teaching your subject and has a Catholic approach. It has been transformational. Like I said, every new journey transforms the traveler. Like the wise men, we don't return the same way. Once you've met the person of Christ, once you've experienced him in community, your life is no longer because we have a mission. In this was one of our dads who was not Catholic, who used to come because his wife worked the night that she chose. So he had to sit around a table with other parents. He celebrated like crazy at the Easter Vigil when he's like, off 30 years of sin. He was this huge expression for everybody else. This was a man whose wife had prayed for years for him to become Catholic. He was Sikh, S-I-K-H. Wasn't practicing, said, you go ahead and raise the kids, but forget about me. I'm not doing that. He is now one of our greatest ushers, youth ministry, chaperones, mission trip chaperones, engaged in everything. How will ministry to families or outreach to families transform you? And what are you willing to do to affect eternity? Thank you.
Thank you for Denise
Thank you.
inspiring us and causing us to really reflect on what we're doing in our ministries. The first workshop begins in 9 minutes at 9:30. Denise will be here offering a workshop, so if you want to hear more from Denise, that'll be here.
At the end of your
other
workshop,
three will
if you
get
could
to
just
school.
let people know
What's the
that
best
I'm
way for them
coming
to get
in
to the
here,
school?
but I'm leaving my workshop
Okay, perfect. So just out the front doors of the church.
to come and
enter the
teach
school,
here. So
and
there's
there
a
are three
5-minute
classrooms with their
transition.
numbers, and they're on the
Okay.
back of the
Just look it up.
Have a great day.
Your